Presumably the most famous Marvel property after the Avengers, the X-Men have ruled the superhero space for years now. And ironically, they're all about representing the woes of the marginalized and the discriminated. X-Men the Animated Series was one of the best superhero cartoons ever made, and X-Men 97 is trying its best to live up to it. However, X-Men were ushered into the modern era thanks to the live-action movies. But as is the case with any franchise, there were several super amazing X-Men projects that ended up in developmental hell. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. The 10 unmade or canceled X-Men movies that could have changed Marvel as we know it, had they been made. So without further ado, let's begin, shall we? X-Men Origins, Magneto. Long before X-Men Origins Wolverine was released in theaters near you, Fox had been busy developing another entry for its planned prequel anthology called X-Men Origins Magneto. This one would have turned Magneto from a franchise villain into the anti-hero of his own standalone origin film. And if you think about it, if any of the mutants deserved their own movie, it had to be him. The man has immense power, but his motives originated in compelling and often misunderstood places, which is why he continues to be one of the greatest comic book villains. X-Men Origins was supposed to be a franchise in its own right, but the only completed film we have is Wolverine's. And as unfortunate as it may sound, anyone who watched that movie could probably understand why Fox didn't have any rush to bring out another Origins movie. But even with the crappy performance of Wolverine, the Magneto project was still in development, and Ian McKellen was expected to return. And he had always loved the character. However, years later, McKellen eventually played Magneto again in X-Men Days of Future Past. There are several theories and scattered pieces of information about how the film would have used him. Some say that McKellen would have been digitally de-aged, perhaps for flashbacks. However, Turner's original script idea was set during World War II, when Eric Lehnsherr would have been in his early 20s. And yeah, recasting a young Eric therefore would have been the wiser thing to do than asking the then 67-year-old McKellen to carry the entire film. And the man is 87 now, by the way. By 2009, McKellen himself admitted that he probably would not return, although he never really ruled out the possibility of a cameo. As far as the question of why the movie was canceled is concerned, well, the major blow came from the Writers Guild of America strike of 2007 and 2008. Writers fought for fair compensation, and because of that, several studio projects had to go into production without complete scripts. Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen faced that problem, and X-Men Origins Wolverine also began principal photography without a finished screenplay, and maybe that's why these movies performed as they did. Needless to say, the strike pushed X-Men Origins Magneto into an indefinite delay, and the end result was that the movie could never escape from developmental hell. However, we did get to see a bit of his origin story in X-Men First Class, but it wasn't a standalone movie now, was it? Channing Tatum's Gambit movie. Channing Tatum had wanted to play Gambit for years, and Deadpool and Wolverine finally gave him that opportunity, because he landed the role along with the other returning Fox characters like Elektra, Toad, and Blade. He is also set to reprise Remy LeBeau in Avengers Doomsday. But of course, this version is gonna be poles apart from the version that Fox had once planned for him. The canceled Gambit film was supposed to be an R-rated romantic comedy, and the script even had mutants having sex, which I think would have been something on the lines of Hero-gasm from The Boys. Anyway, this particular approach could have become a thing when Fox was running the show, but with Disney taking over, it's quite an impossibility. I mean, we don't always know what Disney would do, but we do know what it definitely wouldn't do. And one of those things is sex or complete horror. But if I'm being honest, Marvel could use that sort of tonal variety because every character doesn't really need to have the same set of boundaries, right? In fact, I was glad to see them pushing things a bit with Black Widow in Brand New Day. And as far as Gambit is concerned, he is a mutant who offers the perfect opportunity for something more adult. Maybe Marvel would eventually find a compromise, although it would never be the Fox film Tatum wanted to do. As of now, Gambit has been designed to exist and serve in Deadpool's world, so there's less creative freedom now. All I can say is that a standalone Gambit film would have been nice to see, but with Channing Tatum now 46 years old, it would be difficult for him to look the part in an origin movie. Having said that, a standalone Gambit movie without getting into the origin side of the story is always an option. X-Men: Fear the Beast. A few years ago, longtime franchise editor John Ottman and his assistant Byron Burton revealed that there was, in fact, a solo Beast movie that had been planned, and it was titled X-Men: Fear the Beast. They developed it around X-Men Apocalypse in 2016, but Fox and Simon Kinberg never approved it, and after Disney gained control of the characters, Ottman and Burton released the script online. Set during the late 1980s, the film would have affected the franchise's future and Dark Phoenix. The film would have begun with a short cold open, with Mystique supervising young mutants aboard a bus in Times Square. But they would come under an attack from Friends of Humanity and their giant robots. Jubilee was to be one of the students, while Cyclops, Storm, Jean Grey, and Beast would have helped Mystique fight the Friends of Humanity. Cyclops was to be the one in command, and it would all go well until Beast would lose control and fail the mission. But fret not, this was all simply a danger room exercise, much like the opening of The Last Stand. Hank then would travel to Canada to find Dr. Paul Cartier, a mutant with a similar condition to his own. But the thing is, Cartier had reversed Hank's mutation repressor serum to boost his strength and become Wendigo, a white wolf-like creature who terrorized the locals. Unlike the comics, where Cartier was cursed with cannibalism, this Wendigo was a mutant and partly Hank's creation. He defeats Hank and leaves him badly hurt, after which Professor X contacts a younger Wolverine who would have been played by a new actor. As for Wolverine's arc in the movie, his first scene was similar to Hugh Jackman's cage fight debut, although Xavier's voice had now been replaced with Rogue's, and she would recruit him during the fight. Wolverine traveled to Canada in the brown and tan costume, while Xavier explained what he had forgotten. For the final battle, Hank would use Cartier's serum and become Mega Beast, who was twice his normal size and much darker. He and Wolverine would fight Wendigo through a forest and into a sawmill, while angry locals would attack both creatures. Anna, whom Hank had grown close to, then strikes Wendigo with 2 serum darts. Mega Beast then throws him over a conveyor belt, trapping him in a chain. Once Cartier returns to human form, he slips through the chain and hangs above a wood chipper. With Anna also in danger, Cartier lets go so Hank could save her. The X-Men would later repair Anna's cabin, and Xavier would erase the town's memories, and Wolverine would decline becoming a member of the X-Men. But yeah, the movie was to tease a little something with Jean. Speaking of Jean, I really hope they don't make Hugh Jackman stick his tongue out for Sadie Sink. X-23 spin-off. Laura was only 11 in the film Logan, but the child suffered more than most mutants suffered in an entire lifetime. Since mutants were no longer born naturally, big corporations had them bred as weapons through an expensive process. Laura had been created from Wolverine's DNA, which made her his biological daughter and gave her retractable claws, as well as his healing factor. She was also forced through the soul-tearing and gut-wrenching painful process of having adamantium fused to her skeleton. And of course, she inherited Logan's temper too, because anger usually sent her straight toward extreme violence. Her owners eventually wanted to get rid of her, but Logan accidentally helped her escape. Over 2 extremely emotional hours, the film focused on what made people a family and how far they would go to save someone they loved. After Logan proved that an R-rated superhero film could beat PG-13 movies, both financially and critically, James Mangold received the chance to expand that story. In October 2017, only a few months after Logan reached theaters, he began to work on a direct sequel about X-23. Unfortunately, Disney announced its deal to acquire most of Fox's assets 1 month later. Those assets included the X-Men and Fantastic Four franchises, which would have returned to Marvel Studios and become part of the MCU's future. While the merger moved forward, Fox froze several X-Men projects, including the X-23 film. The deal concluded in 2019, and Mangold confirmed that same year that he was no longer working on the project. Still, the MCU's multiverse saga had created a possible way back for Laura. The Marvels offered a soft introduction for the X-Men, while Deadpool and Wolverine was expected to bring Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine into the MCU. X-Force. Before Disney acquired Fox in 2019, the studio wanted to expand the success of the Deadpool films, which ranked among the highest-grossing R-rated movies ever made. After Deadpool 2, Fox planned an X-Force film that would continue from the ending where Wade Wilson formed his mutant team, and Drew Goddard, who wrote 2011's The Cabin in the Woods and recently made Project Hail Mary, had joined the project. Then the Disney-Fox merger happened, and all progress came to a halt. The Deadpool franchise eventually became a part of the MCU through Deadpool and Wolverine, but Fox's original X-Force film disappeared along with several other projects. Now, the canceled movie would have brought Josh Brolin back as Cable, but that was only half of his role. Brolin had signed a multi-picture agreement and was also expected to play Strife, who would have served as the main villain. There were even discussions about introducing Strife during a post-credit scene in Deadpool 2, although that plan was dropped. For anyone unfamiliar with him, Strife was Cable's clone. So Cable was basically the future son of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor, while the Ascani tribe created Strife as a backup in case Cable died. Apocalypse later took the clone because he wanted to use him as a host body, but abandoned him later on. Once Strife learned that he was the clone instead of the original, he lost his mind and became a villain. I think Brolin in both roles could have been great. He would have played two sides of the same person, with Cable as the hero and Strife as his evil reflection. However, he may have moved beyond the project by now. No exact plot details were revealed, but much like the comics, Strife could have created the Legacy virus, a deadly virus that targeted mutants. Cable, Deadpool, Domino, and the other X-Force members would then have fought to save mutant kind while probably mocking the X-Men for failing to help. Fantastic Four vs. X-Men. Fox had launched both X-Men and Fantastic Four during the early 2000s, but then for some reason, the studio never brought its two Marvel teams together and continued to make despicable reboots and spin-offs. Anyway, the original X-Men trilogy ended in 2006, while Fantastic Four stopped after its second film in 2007. Once both franchises lost momentum, Fox had to find another way forward, and this particular plan began to take shape in 2010 when Matthew Vaughn signed on for X-Men First Class. However, Stintz and Miller were also secretly at work on a much larger crossover. The proposed film could have served as the direct follow-up to First Class. Its story began with Johnny Storm's attempt to capture Molecule Man, but Johnny went nova and caused massive destruction across Manhattan. That disaster led to the Superhero Registration Act, which placed the X-Men and Fantastic Four on opposing sides. So yeah, Fox nearly made its own Captain America Civil War several years before Marvel Studios did. Wolverine and Mr. Fantastic would have fought each other, while Deadpool and Daredevil were also part of the script. Paul Greengrass was approached to direct after his work on the Bourne films and Green Zone. Since he didn't begin Captain Phillips until the summer of 2011, Fox had a possible window to make the crossover with him. However, the project never moved beyond early development. First Class became the main reason, because Fox liked its results despite it being one of the franchise's lowest-grossing entries. The studio used that film as its new template and abandoned the Fantastic Four crossover in favor of X-Men: Days of Future Past. Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde had brief appearances in the first two X-Men films, where two different actors played her. She finally received a major role in X-Men: The Last Stand, with Elliot Page taking over the character before returning for Days of Future Past. Fox announced a Kitty Pryde spinoff in January 2018 and attached Deadpool director Tim Miller, although nobody confirmed whether Page would return as the phasing mutant. Comic book writer Brian Michael Bendis had worked on the screenplay from the beginning and continued with it through February 2019, even as the unfinished Disney-Fox deal placed the project's future in doubt. By November 2019, Miller had accepted that the film was dead. He didn't expect Marvel to invite him back for another X-Men project, although he had loved his Kitty Pryde movie and remained genuinely disappointed that it would never happen. 8. Multiple Man. Before Disney acquired Fox's entertainment assets, the studio tried to build the X-Men franchise into a larger cinematic universe. Some proposed spin-offs focused on fairly obscure mutants, and perhaps the strangest choice was James Arthur Madrox, better known as Multiple Man. His power allowed him to create several duplicates of himself. So yeah, the title would have been doing a lot of work. James Franco became attached to star in November 2017, while the film was expected to take Fox's mutant universe in a much stranger direction, closer to the FX series Legion. Wonder Woman writer Alan Heinberg continued work on the screenplay through 2018. This happened even after Franco faced accusations of sexually exploitative and inappropriate conduct during his time as an acting teacher earlier that year. The film never moved forward and was firmly canceled once Disney and Marvel Studios decided to reset most of Fox's mutant properties. But you know what? Those aren't all the movies that got canceled. Fox canceled several other additional X-Men projects. I want to special mention here the two most famous of them. The first of the two is Omega Red movies. So like most other movies on this list, the Omega Red movie was not a finished screenplay, and of course, there wasn't even a confirmed cast, release date, or formal production slate. It was a late 1980s set story outline devised by X-Men editor and composer John Ottman and his assistant and writer Byron Burton, as part of a proposed interconnected set of X-Men spin-offs. The Omega Red concept was intended to follow Fear the Beast, also in the late 1980s, not as a Deadpool spin-off and not as a project with a completed public script. And the second special mention I want to bring to your notice is the New Mutants sequels. This one was more developed creatively. Director and co-writer Josh Boone and Nate Lee pitched Fox a complete 3-film horror-oriented New Mutants arc, presented as a digital comic book style pitch using panels and imagery from the comics. The proposed second installment was typically referred to as New Mutants Brazil, although it was never officially announced as a final title. As for the core elements of the movie, you'd have had Warlock, the compassionate, shape-shifting technarchy alien whose antagonistic father was also part of the intended story. Boone said Warlock had originally been in the first movie, but was cut when the budget had to be halved. The character's effects requirements were expensive enough to roughly double that film's budget. Karma was going to be a founding comic book New Mutant who would have been introduced and, according to reports on Boone's plan, initially functioned as an antagonist before joining the team. The story would have taken Roberto da Costa, or Sunspot, back to Brazil to reconnect with his estranged mother, while his father, Emmanuel da Costa, sought to kill her to protect his business interests. Boone had cast Antonio Banderas for a post-credits introduction in the first film, with Emmanuel connected to the Hellfire Club in the underlying comic book setup. That tag was never shot. However, the trilogy was conceived before Disney acquired Fox. After the merger, Boone said he and Lee did not substantially pursue the plans, and he stressed that any continuation was ultimately Disney's decision. So yeah, that was all in this one, folks. If you think I missed any particular movie, feel free to let me know in the comments here. And if you liked the video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these awesome videos. Stay safe and have a good one.